Welcome everyone to today's webinar titled We Only Ever See Potential: Global Digital Assessment Trends in Medical Education, Higher Education and Schools. Thank you so much for attending. I'm John Milne, and having spent all of my career in international K-12 and higher education, I'm delighted to host you on today's webinar. You may be on this webinar because you're in an education setting looking to move away from traditional assessment delivery methods, or looking maybe for a more innovative solution. Maybe you're looking for a much more engaging and effective assessment for your high-stakes exams or scenario-based assessments. Or maybe you're looking to increase your levels of automation, create efficiencies, drive up standards, and make your assessments much more candidate-centric. Well, today you couldn't have two more well-qualified individuals on this webinar than Alistair Montgomery and Jeff Hazel, both of whom have been immersed in K-12 and higher education medical assessments all their careers, and they'll be introducing themselves very shortly. Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping pointers. We will have a poll at the beginning of the webinar, which we'd be very grateful if you could complete. It's quite simple and straightforward. You will all be receiving a copy of this video, so don't worry if you miss something. We'll be sending that to you hopefully in the next few days. Please ask any questions that you might have throughout the webinar today by entering them into the question and answer or the Q&A channel. And please do get in touch after the webinar if you have any questions, either for myself or for Jeff or for Alistair, and I'll be happy to introduce them to you to further any conversations that you might have. With the pandemic fast-tracking the digital transformation of assessment, awarding body, medical schools, education groups are all recognizing that in some cases paper-based exams are no longer fit for purpose in a digital age where candidates require on-demand assessments to be flexible and reflect the world that they live and work in. Today we've got Jeff Hazel from Maxinity and Alistair Montgomery from the Academic Profiling Tests. First, I'd just like to introduce Jeff. Jeff is the founder and managing director of Maxinity. Maxinity is a leading provider of exam and course management software for healthcare educators across the globe. Our secure software helps organizations drive improvement in their courses and exams. It does this by streamlining their management and using world-class analytics and reporting. Our focus on healthcare means that we have a deep understanding of both the requirements and the quality assurance processes that you need to adhere to. This focuses us on us developing the software around the specific needs that you have. And Alistair Monty, as he's called, Montgomery, founder of the Academic Profiling Test and assessment consultant. The Academic Profiling Test was developed to assist families to get the best understanding of their child's academic ability using an assessment that can be taken at home. We work with a range of experts, from former head teachers to assessment specialists, to ensure we take an accurate measure of each candidate's unique learning ability. So welcome, Jeff, and welcome, Monty. Lovely to see you both on the webinar today.
It's great to join you. Thanks, John.
So Jeff, in 30 seconds to a minute, can you just give us a brief introduction of who you are, what Maxinity is for, and what it does?
Okay, John, thank you for that great introduction. Looking forward to today and chatting some of this stuff through. I think we've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. Quick bit about me. I actually started out in life wanting to be a teacher, but then got involved in the education side of, the business side of education for an American university in London. And this, combined with my interest in technology, led me to Maxinity and what we call the EdTech sector. I like to think of EdTech, particularly in reference to today's webinar, that it's not just education technology, but also educating about technology. And at at Maxinity, we specialize in digital exam management and course booking software. And MaxExam is our sophisticated digital exam management and assessment platform focused on high stakes exams, particularly in the medical field, health sciences, where accuracy, reliability, and security are essential. So basically, John, I get to indulge in both my passions, and I'm privileged to be able to work in this field.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And Alistair, can you just give, on a slightly different space in the K-12 space, just an introduction of your experience and the academic profiling test and where you fit into the assessment space?
Indeed. Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today from Bristol here in the UK. Yes, my background was in schools originally, and working specifically with neurodiverse students with specific learning needs. In my experience over the last 11 years, I've launched 2 assessments internationally. The first in 2014, both of which assess academic potential across the K-12 sector in core learning potential. So we're looking at English, maths, verbal, non-verbal academic skills. APT, the current project, was launched in 2020, and it works with schools, academic consultants and advisors worldwide to profile candidates' academic strengths and challenges. And my particular interest in this field is in using technology to assess students in a lower stake setting so that we can track progress effectively, but also make sure that people who are working with candidates can get a good idea of their students on a regular basis, using technology in a way that supports their learning going forward.
Great. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Monty. So let's kick off with the first question. And it's really just an opportunity. And I always find these parts of webinars fascinating because it's drawing on the fact that you're both immersed in your respective spaces and you understand what the trends, the developments are, the initiatives, the pressures, the opportunities. So in your respective spaces, what is going on in that landscape? What are the trends? What are the developments, the exciting initiatives? Where are the pressures at the moment, would you say, Jeff?
Well, here at Maxinity, MaxExam's been being used to deliver digital exams since 2004. And in the medical field, this is obviously driven by the need for quality assurance and high quality exams that test people to the same standard year in, year out. But obviously the huge trend at the moment and the discussion that's pretty much driving every conversation is the introduction of AI and how that's affecting assessment, and more importantly, how that could be used to benefit assessment. So where I refer to the fact that we've been delivering digital exams for a long time, actually the format or the method hasn't changed that much. So it's really, back then it was almost mimicking a paper-based exam, but bringing in the benefits of digitizing it and being able to deliver faster feedback, get the results done faster and so on, and get the reliability built in. But what can sometimes be frustrating in our sector is that the governance means it doesn't move on. Those assessments don't perhaps capitalize on some of these opportunities. And so certainly from our perspective, we're now seeing a much more positive view towards AI and how that might help introduce more personalized assessments and adaptive assessments going forward. So it's an exciting time, and also just how it might help as a tool for the examiners and subject matter experts constantly trying to drive us, get new content in and things, help them with that, and help bring in maybe some testing methods or formats that aren't currently used, which will benefit everyone. So there seems to be much more willingness to look at that now.
Great. And Monty, from your perspective, what are some of the trends you're seeing, developments, initiatives, etc.?
Yeah, the big thing for us, and you touched on it at the beginning, John, was is the fact that the pandemic brought about the need for people to use or embrace digital assessments in a way that they hadn't been before. And for that short period of time, we saw a much wider use of digital assessments in contexts that had never been done before. Post-pandemic, we've seen a reversion to the paper-based ways of doing things, almost a comfort in going back to that way of doing things. But the Pandora's box is open. People are aware that there have been alternative ways of doing it. So the trends we're seeing now are people saying, well, actually, there were some really positive aspects that came out of what was forced upon us 4 years ago. And how do we start to integrate those now? Because some of the benefits of, as Jeff touched on, the speed, reliability, the flexibility that it offers, and that's something actually I think we'll talk about a lot in this discussion today, where we don't have to club students into a space and sit them down in front of a paper and have them all sitting it on the same day. There's actually great opportunities to work with different timings, with larger question banks, with a much more flexible approach, which hasn't been available before. And I think that is another key trend that people in our industry are currently grappling with amongst the education world, from schools right the way through to graduate and postgraduate assessment.
Right.
And I think touching on that as well, Alistair, just the aspect of cost is a big driver, particularly in some of the high stakes, what are called OSCEs or scenario based exams that are done, where you've got costs of actors and so on, that there are opportunities coming in now to use AI to potentially reduce cost in these sectors and take away some of the pressures currently. There's a lot involved in putting on an OSCE exam for medical institutions or universities in particular to deliver these exams.
Yeah. Great. Thanks both. And so just building on that, and obviously those that are interested in the assessment space often only ever hear about the scandals and the disasters. We've read recently about the problems that ACT have had in China, the NEET exam in India, and even here in the UK, the Oxbridge entrance exams before Christmas of last year were a bit of an unmitigated disaster. But, you know, within your own sectors, just starting with you, Jeff, you know, what are the benefits? Because we only hear the horror stories, but what are the real tangible benefits that you've seen in working with clients in digitizing what they're doing?
Well, again, something that will crop up all the time is the quality assurance, but it's we call it parity of delivery, but the ability to consistently provide the same platform for people to do their exams on. I get quite heated about the difference between an online assessment and an on-screen or digital assessment, where we had an incident a while back delivering an exam at the Royal College of Surgeons. There'd been the fire in Holborn, and there was no internet connectivity, but we were able to run a fully digital exam, basically using hotspotting, just having a router with a dongle in, and able to run an exam. So actually some of the fears people have about technology and it failing at the critical point, they are fully mitigated against nowadays. And we see only advantages provided people start to embrace the technology for what it is rather than try and mimic what they have been doing, I think is an important step.
Yeah, great. And Monty, the benefits for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the horror stories which you alluded to, John, which came out of the pandemic, was these online proctored exams where they were kind of semi-proctored by people, banks and banks of invigilators sitting on screens watching people take examinations. I think actually the difficulties with that is that it turns the online delivery of an examination into a bit of an arms race in how can you mitigate against it, and then how do people try and get around that mitigation, and then how do people then try and still find a way to cheat, which is actually not addressing the problem, which is the high stakes nature of the examinations and the pressures that are put on the candidates to perform on a particular day and things like that, which isn't utilizing the flexibility that online assessments actually presents one with. So there's a bit of a battle going on at the moment. There's a little bit of how do we do it like we always used to and feel assured that it feels the same way, but at the same time embrace the technology, which is moving along and actually presenting opportunities which haven't been around before. And Jeff, I think, mentioned before that there's a lot to catch up with and actually begin to utilize within the assessment space, which can allow us to take advantage of the great things that we can now do without having the mindset that it has to be delivered in that really rigid and difficult to manage way. So I think that's the bit which I think is a really positive aspect of that challenge. Really.
Yeah. And Jeff.
So I was just going to say that actually on that, some of the things that perhaps are where the industry as a whole has struggled. We were forced, as we've said, with the pandemic, to go fully online. But it's also, I think, the ethical considerations have struggled to keep up, particularly around public trust of AI, and then the privacy and data security aspects come in. But basically the privacy of suddenly people being watched through their devices and so on, and the ethical considerations, not just of AI here, which is definitely lagging behind, it's catching up very quickly. But it's also just the how that affects how people invigilate or mark an exam, where they're viewing maybe the background of where that student's sitting the assessment or that candidate is sitting the assessment. Does everyone have access to a device that's capable of running that assessment, and so on? So these things, it's really interesting how all these things are scrabbling to catch up with the technology in many aspects.
Yeah. So, Jeff, come back to you in a second. Monty, just asking you to refer to your K-12 experience and or any other experience outside of that space that you've got, where a setting, whether it's a group or a school or an exam board, has gone digital, for lack of a better expression. Can you just give us an example of where they simply haven't looked back, they've seen the benefits and they're continuing to stride forward and make those improvements? And yes, they'll have their ups and downs, but ultimately they're very fixed on making us a success, and they can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a great example here is in the UK independent schools market, where you might be talking about applying to famous schools such as Eton or Harrow, these ones that we know. In the past, their way of doing entrance examinations for these highly sought after places, these are high stakes exams for students who are not in the UK, the old way of doing it would have been to send out the school's own entrance papers to British Council offices around the world, students having to travel a distance to their local British Council office in order to sit the test on a particular day at a particular time, those tests to be delivered by non-experts in the British Council office, and then to scan those papers, send them back, a long and drawn out process. And then the school, of course, having to receive those papers, mark them perhaps outside of the normal school time, the whole thing long, drawn out and difficult. what has happened in the last 6 or 7 years, and what I've been very much involved in the work that I've done, is actually using digital assessments instead of these old paper-based systems, allowing those assessments to be delivered online, so there isn't the paper element of it, allowing those tests to be, because they're delivered online, the invigilation doesn't necessarily need a specialist or even a venue, if you can have a much more flexibility in who proctors or administers that particular assessment, and a school gets instant results. And that world has completely changed, flipped on its head, in terms of assessing students coming inbound to the UK, and sitting high stakes examinations for entrance purposes. So that's in the case of where what we've seen change completely and really help the world in that sense.
And Jeff, you're working with medical councils, exam boards, medical schools. Can you think of an example, either internationally or in the UK, where the client has just adopted your software, your advice, your consultancy, and actually they've made tremendous progress and are forging ahead?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there's lots of examples. I will just say, rather than specifically medicine, we do say health sciences, just because it covers a bit broader, but it's we've got, again, certainly the aspects of when the pandemic hit and the ability to deliver certain types of exams quickly, but the key thing that we've brought, and the organizations that we work with, be it from so we deliver a qualifying exam for overseas dentists coming into the UK, and it is essential that exam, because it's such high stakes, it is essential that the quality of that exam is maintained, because these are professionals who are going to come and practice dentistry in the UK. So we need to make sure that they are fitting and able to do that, because otherwise potentially lives are at risk. So that ability, and also on the flip side of that, it's these people, because it's such a high stakes, high cost exam, they can be quite litigious if they feel their experience wasn't fair, that they were in any way impeded in doing that exam. So again, this quality assurance piece, that's where we've driven, and the statistical analysis and the ability to ensure that the exam year on year is not only improving, but that the quality is there, that you're not using questions that aren't performing properly, but also that you can bring in new questions and test how they are without including them in the results and pilot them and so on. So the flexibility, and most importantly at university level, it's the ability to get feedback back to the candidates quickly. And we talk about, I'd like to touch on the difference between blueprinting and curriculum mapping, but one thing, or learning outcomes, but true blueprinting is the ability to create an exam that exactly maps the parameters of a previous exam using different questions or items in there. And we're also able to deliver feedback based on areas in the curriculum that haven't been covered. This enables the students to then go and focus on those areas. It also enables assessors to see where they may need more content or the teaching is falling down. So all of this, and one of the biggest complaints with undergraduate students is the speed of feedback and the depth of feedback. So this is where digital is able to help both sides, both the teaching faculty and the candidates or the students have a better experience.
Yeah, okay. Okay, next topic, and this is where we all draw deep breaths. Artificial intelligence. Where are we with AI? What impact is it having, and where is it going? Monty, what's your thoughts on this big hot topic?
Yeah, the big one, I think, the big impact that we're seeing is the great benefit in my area of generating new content, new question content. I should specify. In the past, creating new question content, new exams was a long and drawn out process where you would take a specialist, expensive team to create that content for you, and then to validate those questions would require research projects with a cohort with which you could standardize those questions or work out what was a good question, what was a poor question. And that process was expensive. It was long. It took a long time. What AI is helping is generate quality questions. It's no substitute for those then going through a rigorous validation process, but with the benefit of big data and large cohorts of students with which we can test new questions. We can create banks of questions which are thousands of questions deep in a fraction of the time that it took well-known international organizations like GL, who run the CAT testing worldwide, organizations like CHEM, the Center for Evaluation and Monitoring, formerly at Durham, but now at Cambridge Assessment. Their research projects, 7 or 8 years ago, took years to get questions in front of candidates in real situations. Now companies can do it in months. And that's the big change we're seeing. And the wonderful thing about having larger banks of questions is that we can lower the stakes of exams from each examination being super high stakes, because we've got a small battery of questions that we don't want to get exposed to the candidate base. We can actually say, well, actually, we've got a huge bank of questions that we can put in front of the candidate base, which means if they sit the test today, or they sit the test tomorrow, or they sit the test next week, the likelihood of candidates encountering exactly the same question content like they would on a paper-based examination is very low. And therefore, we can lower the stakes of our assessments, which reduces everything on the stakes for the higher institution. It builds in that flexibility that I talked about before. It lowers this, and most importantly, it lowers the stakes for the candidate themselves, because the opportunity to retake, the opportunity to know that was a particular bank, and you have the opportunity to demonstrate their competency later on. That I think is the big advantage that I'm seeing come through, and I hope that will start to filter through. I don't think it's being felt yet in educational institutions, but the idea is now there, and it's beginning to be demonstrated in certain areas, and I think that's the big thing for me, which makes a big difference.
Yeah, great. And Jeff, obviously you're in health sciences in the high stakes space. I mean, a lot of the exams clearly are life or death, really, in terms of the nature of those exams. So I know from talking to you that AI is a big topic. Where are you seeing the impact right now, and where is it headed from your perspective, do you think? Well,
I think now the focus is more as the acceptance creeps in, and the understanding that AI, I think our initial fears were AI is going to take over, and that's, I like to say to people, it's that my job's going to be taken by AI. No, your job will be taken by someone who knows how to work with AI, and this is something that we touch on all the time, because particularly from our point of view now, it's about implementing some tools. It's almost using this, not being afraid to use the AI label, which is good, and a bit more understanding around the terminology or these labels is handy. But from our point of view, it's tools that will help subject matter experts generate new content. I talked about the fact that we've been using blueprinting for a long time to basically generate exam papers to the same quality and standard as previous ones. But again, if the bank of questions that's being generated from is too limited, because faculty haven't had time to put in new questions and review them, all of which can be done in the system, well, that's what takes time. And if those questions haven't been tagged, let's call it good old-fashioned meta tagging, just for the sake of understanding what we're talking about, or mapped to the curriculum, or against domains, or Bloom's taxonomy of learning, anything like that, whatever you're trying to measure against, then it becomes, it's useless. So therefore, the tools that we're able to bring in with AI now are automatic mapping. You generate a new question and it can automatically map it to the learning outcomes or the curriculum. And whilst it might make some errors, the high percentage of them are going to be accurate, and then they get checked by the experts and by the humans and signed off. So these tools are what we're starting to see now being introduced that are going to help create content, as Alistair touched on. It's going to allow faculty to generate much better content much more quickly, do all the mapping, so that then these big powerful tools that can help them create full exams and manage the quality assurance become really useful. And also, because it's a continuous process, you can also use AI to, for example, just rewrite or upgrade a question that's now been seen in the analysis to be performing badly in a certain context. So there's all these things that will just be like a breath of fresh air for a lot of our users. So faculty members are already very busy, and to be able to benefit from AI. And I think also it's about the transparency. When the stuff, I think a lot of initial focus on AI was about the cheating aspect, and how's it being used for cheating, and is it being used for cheat analysis and things like that. So again, it's much more transparency and engagement with the end users or the candidates to try and explain this and for everyone to understand what's happening.
Yeah. And just staying with AI, but focusing now on academic integrity, because I know we've got attendees on here from both the K-12 and the higher education space. I mean, what are the benefits of AI in terms of maintaining academic integrity? Because we do hear a lot about cheating and how easy it might be or not using digital assessments. But where do you see the real benefits of AI in maintaining high quality academic integrity? Monty, where do you see that sitting?
Yeah, well, I think Jeff came up with a really good point there, talking about where AI can be used to identify language that has been lifted or generated. I think that's something which is an area where it's helping to maintain that integrity. I think one of the areas which I'm talking to a number of schools about at the moment is the desire not just to look at academic potential in a testing context, but to have a better sense of the critical thinking skills that we want the humans still to have going forward. And this is to say that we're moving into an age where academic recall, which is where our examinations have been based in the past, which is, can you remember the information required, is becoming less important, because you can actually find the information you need if you need it. You don't necessarily have to walk around with it all stored in your brain anymore. And so what needs to happen within schools, and what needs to happen with the integrity of the outcomes from school, is to actually create humans who can look at information critically, identify what is backed up with good evidence, to draw good conclusions, make inferences on their own, things which actually the information age doesn't provide for them. And the idea is to help to develop some assessments which can help identify those skills within students now as part and parcel of examinations, because that is increasingly vital in the day and age that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, great. And Jeff, where for you in terms of academic integrity, how is AI helping, and where do you see it strengthening that particular topic?
Well, I have mentioned it a lot and been particularly focused on it, but the quality assurance side is obviously the big one. And then, as I said, the ability for it to help generate content is critical. But also, I think what's key for us, particularly in this sector, is the ability to start using, and we've touched on this all the way through, it's to start introducing question types, assessments that are more suited to the digital environment. Something I always touch on, that you've got neurodiverse children coming through, they're encouraged to use technology. but then when they come to sit critical exams, they're put back onto pen and paper in many cases, and things like that can be a challenge. So I think the onus is on all of us to start developing, let's put it in simple terms, new question types, but ways of using these mediums more effectively, and allowing AI to perhaps help us with this adaptive assessment, which is what Monty touched on as well, but the idea of these personalized learning paths, but also an exam that will adjust depending on how well you're answering it. Why do you need to continue testing a candidate who's already clearly demonstrated they have the knowledge at that point? So these things, these are the tools that we're starting to come in, rather than this old concept which we've had with us for years, where it's just, oh, it's MCQs, multiple choice questions. That's what we're talking about. That's all that digital does.
Yeah, right. Okay, and just picking up on that word that you used, neurodiversity, Jeff, you and I have got personal experience of this within our own families, and it's something that's very dear to our heart. And Alistair, you've got a lot of professional experience in this space, but in what way is the digitization of assessments helping with inclusion and helping with the increasing numbers of neurodiverse students that we're seeing globally?
Monty, do you want to go?
Yeah, I will. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself there. Yeah, the big one for me is making sure that some of the best things about having a flexibly delivered assessment can be brought in for those students who are neurodiverse. One of the beautiful things about APT, our assessment, is if we have a student who has a specific learning needs, we can add 20% extra time without having to speak to the invigilator, make sure that this is something which is catered for. We can make sure that they sit the assessment in a place that is not overstimulating, or what have you. We can build in breaks for them if they need it into the timing of the assessment, because ultimately we want to get the best measure of the skills we're trying to measure, not to see how well they can sit in a room for 90 minutes. And so those sorts of things are the great opportunities, I think, which come about at the moment. Other things in terms of accessibility, rather than printing out large versions for those who have sight impairments, we can use all the available technology on a computer screens, which the students are already familiar with, in terms of either highlighting text to be read aloud, or increasing the size or contrast of text. All those little things make a huge impact on those students with specific learning difficulties. Right. So I think that's a big factor for us, which we've almost taken for granted now in our sector, but we are, I'm sure Jeff is the same, frustrated when we still see it being a factor in traditional paper-based examinations.
Yeah, great. And Jeff, any comment to make there from your perspective?
I agree. It's the same things where you're able to offer screen readers, adapting of color, more time, things like this. They're great, and that they work really well, and the ability to apply those instantly and for an undergraduate candidate throughout their journey through their degree. But where sometimes it's limiting is obviously the awarding body's desire to have the exam in a set format and to be equal for everyone, to mimic the pen and paper type environment. So again, it's going to involve a shift in mindset throughout the system for it to develop. So we constantly talk about parity of delivery, but parity of delivery, may not suit all people. So this is where this has to be adapted, and you've got to build. I talked about building the trust, because again, people on both sides can be skeptical of the technology coming in here. So from our point of view, I think this constant, well, we're going to embrace for neurodiverse people. We've got all these tools, we've got all these things we can use, but we're limited because the body that does for the high stakes summative assessment, they want to try and then bring everyone onto a level playing field. yet you've spent the entire time not doing that as people have gone through and done their learning in their formative learning. So I think it's trying to blend those and take the benefits of both worlds.
Yeah.
And if we continue to build the trust in AI, I think this can really help deliver the reassurance to candidates that they're being assessed fairly, but the reassurance to those setting the assessments and those awarding the qualifications that whilst you sat a different type of assessment to me, or your questions were slightly different, you've still been assessed to the same standard. And this is the constant debate that we're having.
Yeah.
And it is not, as Monty referred to, it's not being held back by the technology now. It's more that we need to catch up with the technology.
Yeah. And Jeff, slightly changing the focus, we focused a lot on written examinations in the first 40 minutes of this webinar, but we haven't really talked about scenario-based examinations. And maybe this is an opportunity for you to gently upsell Maxinity and the services that you provide. But in terms of scenario-based exams, that's something that's coming back from a lot of clients that we're talking to in the health sciences space as something they'd love to move more and more towards a digital solution, but they're just juggling in their heads how they are going to do that. What would you say to them in terms of the benefits of using what you do and the software that you've developed?
Again, I think this is an interesting one, and it's again about developing new types of learning. And I said it early on that these scenario-based assessments are very expensive to run, but and I always put it in them. I am not medically qualified, but have spent a lot of time in that environment. But if you want to assess how someone is with how they are in front of a patient, and how they behave under a stress situation, and how they speak to them, there is perhaps no better way than face-to-face watching them in a live situation, but that also has risks. So then what people do is they bring in actors. That's very costly. Now, whilst we can keep the assessment platform the same, so the examiners doing that assessment can use it's done as fairly as possible, and they get all the benefits of it. What about the idea of bringing in augmented patients, where they can track, for example, whether if you had a guardian child situation where the child is the patient, you're asked a question by the child and you respond to the guardian. And I can see from your eye movement that you're looking at the guardian and you've kind of dismissed me. So the ability to then integrate that kind of technology, where the system can then say, well, actually, we're going to mark you down for that because you didn't address the child when you spoke. So there's lots of opportunities with all these different types of technologies coming in, but one of the big factors will always be cost. So from our point of view, it's having that ability where we can operate in a hybrid mode. We can utilize, obviously, Zoom and Teams and things exploded during the pandemic. So they've now become the norm. But what we're able to do is our system's able to adapt to whichever delivery method you're choosing to use. So this is how we can start to embrace these new technologies, or even run different delivery methods in parallel in the same, to be able to assess the results and benchmark which one performs better.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a massive subject, John, and I was aware when you said we're 40 minutes in that I perhaps had to keep it brief, and in trying to keep it brief, I might have I've covered it very superficially, but there is a lot to cover on that.
No, it's good. It's good just to reassure those on the webinar that there are solutions that are being used and that they are reliable and that there are options.
Exactly.
And Monty, presumably, I mean, you talked about critical thinking, and obviously within schools, there's a big drive towards helping students with, social, emotional learning and applying real world and, life skills in an academic setting. But presumably there's an opportunity in the K-12 space for some scenario-based low stakes assessments just to get a better understanding of the holistic development of a young person?
I completely agree, and I think this is an opportunity which a number of schools are beginning to touch on now. Uh, and what's nice is that it's not a test, it's not an examination. This is a assessment in a way where we can see what students find easy, what they find difficult. As Jeff says, you can actually look at responses to certain situations and provide feedback. And this is a different type of assessment that we haven't really seen in a formal sense in schools in the past, where we can give feedback to students to say, well, you know, we presented you with this scenario. Your initial response was revulsion. You know, and if we go back and analyze that and reflect on that, would that be your response again? And it's that sort of assessment feedback loop which schools are beginning to touch on and say this is really handy in a whole range of situations, not just an academic setting, not just how do you respond to geography or sociology or physics, but how are you going to work better with your peers? And when students leave this establishment, we know that they are equipped to deal with a whole range of situations for the workplace or perhaps their next institution that they move on to.
Yeah.
And I think that is very much in its infancy, but it's quite an exciting area of K-12 education at the moment. And I think it's something which a number of very interesting companies are working on. And I know, John, you're quite connected to Persona here in Bristol,
Yes.
who know a little bit about that. So if there's anybody who's interested in what's happening in that field, they can get in touch and we can pass on some details on that.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we're drawing to the end of this webinar, 50 minutes in, and it's flown by. I find it fascinating. Thank you both. Just to wrap up, and maybe starting with you, Jeff, if you had 2 minutes to just summarize where you are as a company and your enthusiasm for what lies ahead in terms of the opportunities and the benefits to you and your business, and just to the digital assessment space, what would you say to the attendees today?
I can probably cut it down to less than 2 minutes, which I know will surprise you, John, but it suddenly now feels massively exciting that actually, you know, we've got powerful tools we've been using for years. We've got that quality assurance. That piece is there. We've been calling it blueprinting for years. Well, actually, why do we need to be afraid it's AI, really? You know, that's the power of this stuff. But I think from our point of view, the appetite is now there to work. The confidence is there in these high stakes assessments. So therefore, we can now start to look forwards and work out how can we better use it. So from our point of view, we're so excited about some of the tools we're introducing now to, as I've said, to help beleaguered faculty generate more content and questions, and to assist with just gathering better analysis faster and more targeted feedback and so on, and just being able to generate things and help the assessment setters is so exciting. And there is now an appetite, as we've said, to start discussing let's call it new question types. Yeah. Just different things we can do. And everyone, you see, I'm aware now I'm going to go on for more than 2 minutes, John.
Yeah, so I'm timing you, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. Everyone, don't start counting down from 10. I'll panic. But everyone, there was the big hoo-ha about online proctoring and the use of AI in online proctoring, and that became a big debate. But we've moved on from that now. I think people are seeing, as we've just talked about, how it can help neurodiverse students, how it can embrace different types of technology. It can help those setting the assessments, trying to generate content. It can help produce new content for them, but it still needs those humans to develop it. So we're really excited about how we're able to now have standardized definitions of what AI is without the fear, and start saying, well, this tool, it's an AI tool, it's going to help you. It's a hybrid thing. The AI is going to help you, but you still need to sign that off. You need to be it needs human AI interaction, or the subject matter experts still need to be involved. So we're really excited about what we can do to make our software, make MaxExam even more powerful and helpful.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Monty.
Yeah, two big things for me here at APT. The first is really embracing the flexibility of the way that we deliver assessments and the way that we have delivered assessments and how we plan to do it in the future. The biggest thing for us is that we know that we can deliver an assessment anywhere in the world as long as they've got an internet connection and a device, can be a tablet, anything from that to anything more sophisticated. That knowledge is one of the best things about working in this field at the moment, and one of the most exciting factors. And the second one is the speed of development. That's something which plagued us 10 years ago, when you turned around and said, actually, I want to test something slightly different, or I want to bring out a new assessment. And you're thinking, okay, the lead time from wanting to do something to actually getting it in front of candidates was a very long time, and whereas now that has been significantly shortened, and with no less quality, I should add, and that's the two things I think which are most exciting for me in the field of K-12 assessment at this time, and it's looking to get better as we move forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you, Monty. Fascinating 55 minutes there of insight into the latest trends and developments and initiatives. Really appreciate your time. Thoroughly enjoyed the insights. And just for those attendees on the webinar, if you're interested in learning more either about Jeff and Maxinity or Monty and the APT, please do get in touch. And don't forget also that in addition to their companies' profiles, we do offer the opportunity for any consultations or consultancy that you might want to have, because we understand that these are big decisions. These are high stakes decisions, even though some of the assessments might be low stakes. But please do get in touch if you feel that you would like to engage with us more. We will be doing more webinars on a variety of different topics. But thank you for joining us from all over the world, and we look forward to seeing you again in a future webinar. So thank you, Monty. Thank you, Jeff, and have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.